Well, look. Well, Alex. Morning, Anne. Morning, Ian. Morning, Paul. Mark, Maria, Kirsty, Melanie, Lindsay. Don't seem to be any chat up on YouTube yet. Morning, Christina, Karen, Margaret, Margaret, Mark again, Gillian, Nancy. Morning, Nancy. Morning, Tommy. Still nobody can come up and resteam. That's quite unusual. Morning, Thomas. Morning, Maggie. Alan. Oh, nearly there. Then we'll get this broadcast underway. Don't know what's up with this chat today in restream. Well, I'm sure it'll sort itself out. Right, folks, that's 100 of you on board, so let's get this broadcast underway. It's Indie Truck Davey out the truck and at home in his office in Salford, North Lanarkshire, where it is a fine morning, chilly at 0 degrees. Okie dokie. Right, let's get that's the weather forecast for Salford, North Lanarkshire. You want to know the weather's like with you? Look what you're in, bloody one day. Right, this is the news review for 18th to the 1st, 2023. The Wednesday started with two major themes in the rags: the GRR bill, a gender recognition reform bill, blocked by Governor General Viceroy Jack, and we'll see UK Westminster government in court as the Scottish government challenges Jack's decision to issue a Section 30 order to veto the gender recognition reform bill. Okay. And the other big story in the press was food price inflation is keeping inflation as a whole at an all-time high, or at a high. Now, the basic staples here in the UK in 2022 shot up by 30% in price. Food price inflation is now at 15% apparently across the board. Right, but the staples that went up by 30%, we're talking about dairy, we're talking about cereals, we're talking about bread, we're talking about the usual stuff, you know. So the basic foods, eggs and things like that have shot up by 30% in 2022. Absolutely outrageous. Well, you know, Brexit is a big contributor to that, and food price inflation, I expect, will hold inflation much higher than what the Bank of England and the other think tanks such as the OBR and the IFS believe it will be by the middle of the year. I think food prices this year are going to be a real problem, folks, because as we spoke about yesterday, UK farmers are producing 20% less, and it's harder to bring food in. And as the UK imports 60% of its food because it has no food security, there may be trouble ahead. Right, moving on. Wednesday started with the news that previous Chancellor and now Tory Party Chairman Nadhim Zahawi paid over £1 million to HMRC to settle a tax dispute. Mr Zahawi's tax affairs had been subject to investigation by HMRC, as it appears that Mr Zahawi has been hiding his loot in an offshore account. Mr Zahawi should be in jail for his tax avoidance. No in the Cabinet Office or chair of the Tory Party. If I believe it was a horse racing boy, Piggott his name was, he defrauded the tax man at 300,000 and went to jail for 3 years. It's believed that Zahawi has settled at £1 million when he owes the taxman £3 million. Why isn't this guy in jail for tax avoidance? Mental. Right, here we go. Right, moving on. Wednesday, in Boomnat Road in the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers, It's been reported that Mr. Sunak has ordered ministers to attack shadow cabinet ministers at least once a week on policy or personality to try and claw back Labour's lead in the polls. Usual Tory pish, if you can't play the ball, play the man or play the person, all right? So, just the usual murky pish from the Tories. Davy says, I guess we'll see a lot of slandering of people going on in Westminster. Why? Because the ministers can't attack shadow ministers for the Labour Party on policy, because you couldn't put a fag paper between the Tories and Labour right now on policy. Brexit, immigration, austerity, public services, you couldn't put a fag paper between them. Starmer's talking about using the private sector in the national health, creating more competition, taking money out of the national health. Starmer's talking about not getting his chequebook out. The chequebook out, sorry. So austerity will go ahead. Starmer's talking about taking the same stance on immigration as Sunak and the Tories, and the same again with Brexit. So right now, we're going to see a lot of people being slandered in Westminster because they can't play the ball. Labour and Tories are identical in policy. Absolutely no difference between the two of them. So I guess there'll be a lot of people being slandered by Tory ministers over the next wee while. Right, moving on, Wednesday, and it's reported that Labour leader and Shadow Chancellor are off to the World Economic Forum at Davos in Switzerland. The topics on the agenda for this year are cost of living crisis, the ongoing war in Ukraine, the climate crisis, the growing food crisis worldwide, and the fourth industrial revolution and the transition to a green economy or a green world. All right. Now, don't think that these political leaders, of which there'll be 1,500 of them there, and thousands of businessmen are there to sort out any of these things. They're looking at how they can prolong the gouging that's going on in the world markets. On the cost of living crisis, well, they're creating it. They're the ones that are holding up the supply chains. Right? The ongoing war in Ukraine is being reported by Redact website that at Davos they're talking about how to prolong the conflict because the bankers and investors and the war machine are all making a fortune out of it. All right. On the climate crisis, at Davos they're talking about ways around it, not the way to sort it. Right. On the growing food crisis, well, they're also creating that, the corporate giants. There is plenty of land, there's plenty of seed, there's just no will to make sure everybody gets fed. So they're gouging on food prices as well, all right? And as to the fourth industrial revolution, the transition to a green world, you can bet your boots that they're going to slow it as much as possible because they want to exploit oil and gas much more. Simple as that. What's happening in Davos at the World Economic Forum is not in the interest of us, the people of this planet. It's in the interest of corporate giants. That's why it's called the Economic Forum. Anyway, Starmer's off there with the Shadow Chancellor, who is Rachel Reeves, and they're off to tell the Economic Forum that the UK is open for business. It is expected that Mr. Starmer and Mr. Sunak will be ignored. The giant powers that are at play at Davos at the World Economic Forum are not interested in isolationist UK, Little Britain. They've got bigger markets to play in China with billions of people, India, billions of people, Pakistan, Brazil, all huge markets compared to the UK, US, Europe, all huge markets compared to the UK. And they're not interested in setting up or inward investment in the UK. A, they can't export from the UK easily, and B, they don't have access to the EU for the UK anywhere. So Starmer can go there and try and tell them the UK will be open for business under a Labour government. Sunak can go there and try and tell them the UK is open for business under the current Conservative government. Nobody's interested. It's no investment in the UK that's going on by these corporate giants. It's asset stripping. Both. But we should be more concerned with the fact that our political leaders are actually part of this World Economic Forum crap. Because they're not acting in the interest of the people, they're acting in the interest of corporate giants. We don't elect them to act in the interest of corporate giants. We elect them to act in the interest of the people. Okay. Moving on. Wednesday. Now, is there a shift in the points of view of the Labour Party in Scotland after the Governor-General Alistair Jack blocks the GRR bill? Labour MSP Paul Sweeney tells the Pravda, the BBC, that the Viceroy Jack should get back into his box. This was Paul Sweeney, Labour MSP, when he's been interviewed about the GRR bill on the Pravda yesterday. And he was asked about it, and he said the Viceroy Jack should get back in his box, and that what was going on was an insult and an attack on the democratic institution, which is Holyrood. So it would appear that Paul Sweeney, as well as Monica Lennon and a few others in the Labour Party, are well pissed off. Sarwar's keeping his head down in this one. Hey. Right, moving on. Wednesday lunchtime comes round, and the weekly Punch and Judy show is on in the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers. And tax dodgers, may I add. Right, so PMQs is on. First up with Starmer, he went on ambulance waiting times in England. Starmer says heart and stroke patients in England are waiting up to 2 hours to 2 hours 20 minutes for an ambulance rather than the prescribed 18 minutes, which is the guidelines down that road. Okay, Sunak avoids the question and blames everything on everyone and but the Tory government. Starmer went on the death of a 26-year-old cancer patient called Stephanie from Portsmouth, who collapsed and died waiting on an ambulance. Sunak had a go at Starmer for not supporting the minimum service bill. He says that would have prevented that from happening, which is all crap, of course. As we know, the minimum service bill is to stop key workers being able to go on strike. Right, Starmer then asked Sunak when he'd stop blaming others and get the ambulance service in England back on track to meet the 18-minute maximum wait for priority calls. Sunak said healthcare systems across the UK are under pressure. Sunak had a go at Welsh Labour's record on running the Welsh NHS. Sunak says, it's your fault, Starmer, you won't support the minimum service bill. Right, Starmer went on the amount of people who will call on ambulances in the period of Prime Minister's questions. Starmer said during the 40 minutes that Prime Minister's questions on, 700 people would call an ambulance, and 2 of them would be heart attack victims, and at least 4 of them would be strokes out of these 700 calls. He says, Starmer wants to know what Sunak's going to do about these waiting times. Somebody is implying that people could die during Prime Minister's questions because of problems in the ambulance service. You know, Sunak played the man and not the ball, calling Starmer a liar who would take the UK back into the EU and resume free movement of people. Sunak says Starmer is a politician with moving principles. He could be right there. But that's the Tory tactic. If you can't play the policy, can't give the answer on what you're doing to fix the situation, then play the man and don't answer the question. So Starmer got bloody insulted by Sunak. Sunak, we've just been talking about how Sunak's ordered his other ministers to behave in that manner. And that was the end of Starmer's questions. Nothing resolved at all. Sunak's just another bojo, stones their lies, blusters and bluffs. All right. Anyway, next up was Stephen Flint, SNP. He went on a recent attacks on devolution. Monday, the introduction of the minimum service bill against the wishes of the Scottish Government and the Welsh Government. Tuesday, Section 35 order, and he says Wednesday will see the retained EU law bill introduced against the wills of the Scottish Parliament, Welsh Parliament and Northern Irish Parliament, actually. Mr Flynn asked if we were heading back to direct rule. Mr Sunak says the Section 35 was procedural and necessary to protect women and children. Law of bollocks, of course, because we know 44 other countries have introduced the same gender reform laws. Women and children's safe spaces have not been violated, and predatory men haven't been looking for gender change certificates to get them access to places in these 44 other countries. So I take it here in Scotland, the men are so perverse that we can't be trusted to behave ourselves. We can't be trusted not to go along and ask for a gender change certificate to get into women and children's safe spaces. Now, if this works in 44 other countries, including Finland, Denmark, and Ireland, and these issues haven't came up, then what makes Scotland uniquely different that these issues would arrive in Scotland? Are the men in Scotland somehow different from men in Finland, Denmark, Ireland? Wow. The evidence of our own eyes and how this works in other nations tells us the legislation was right. It works. And it hasn't created a situation or regular situations where predatory men ask for gender change certificates so they can access women's spaces. Oof. Also, at PMQs yesterday, Mark Fabricant, you know, the pound shop Boris, he made an interesting remark while discussing the Welsh government's decision to introduce a tourist tax, the way they're going to here in Scotland as well. Councils will be given the ability to introduce a tourist tax, basically a levy on a hotel room, if you like. Anyway, but what Mr Fabricant said was quite interesting. He said, why should they invest English money in Wales? Since when did UK taxpayers' money become English money? The mask slipped. It would appear the decision by the Supreme Court has emboldened the English to think that Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are bloody colonies instead of partners in a union. So there you go, folks. It's no UK taxpayers that invest in the UK infrastructure. Apparently it's English money. The Welsh people don't pay tax according to Fabricant. The Scottish people don't pay tax according to Fabricant. The Northern Irish people don't pay tax according to Fabricant. According to Fabricant, it's English money. Woof. The imperial mask slips. Mental. Right, moving on. Wednesday, and the Levelling Up Fund monies were approved for several projects in Scotland. This is a direct attack on devolution by Westminster, as funds for Scotland are supposed to go to the Scottish Parliament for the Scottish MSPs to decide where funds should be allocated. This is the start of a majorly undermining the devolution settlement. Devolution is now over. They're spending direct into Scotland. These are also the baubles that are to be offered the Scottish people to tell us the union's great and strong. Wow. So 177 million, a fart in the wind, is going to be invested in Scotland. So where's it going to go? A roll-on, roll-off ferry for the Fair Isles between Orkney and Shetland, and apparently the mainland, sorry, Orkney and Shetland, and apparently 27 million has been allocated to that. I'd like to see buy a roll-on, roll-off ferry for that. The theatre in Kilmarnock's been allocated money. There's been 19 million allocated to Stirling to regenerate an area in Stirling, and there's projects in Macduff and in Peterhead. There you go. So direct investment in Scotland by Westminster is happening. The devolution settlement has just been ripped up by Westminster. Funds for Scotland are supposed to go through the Scottish Parliament. That's part of the agreement under devolution. Well, the criminal cabal have decided that the Scotland Act and the agreements in it no longer stand. Right, moving on. Wednesday, D3 of the teachers strikes here in Scotland. Wednesday strike affected Orkney and Fife. Today's strike will affect Moray and North Lanarkshire. Right, so as we know, it's 16 days of rolling strikes. If you want to know where these strikes are taking place and when they're taking place in which areas, you can jump onto my timeline. I'll put the graphic up that tells you where and what days, which areas will see strike action by teachers. Okay, now speaking of schools, yesterday was day 3 and today will be day 4 of schools in the Highlands and Islands being disrupted by winter weather here in Scotland. You think they prep for it? Hey, this is Scotland, we're used to winter weather. Anyway, moving on. Wednesday, and the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations say many voluntary organisations will cease to exist due to a perfect storm, we're being told. COVID recovery, high cost of energy and cost of living crisis will put pressure on the Scotland's voluntary organisations. Paul Brady of the Scottish Council of Voluntary Organisations says the perfect storm, and just when people need voluntary organisations the most, it looks like they're not going to be able to access them because they'll be gone. Now, the Scottish Government has said they're looking at how to help the voluntary sector, but there isn't any wriggle room in the Scottish budget, the block grant. Okay, so problems in the voluntary sector as well. And I was reading reports yesterday about how contributions to food banks are starting to drop as well, because for obvious reasons everybody's budgets are tighter. So that couple of quid you used to use to buy at the supermarket each week to buy some goods to put into the food bin at the supermarket, I'm afraid, not happening. There's 101 people watching us on YouTube at the moment. I'm sorry, folks, I can't see your comments. There seems to be a glitch in the Restream feed today. Alright, so thanks for watching. Hit the like button there on YouTube, please. That helps the channel. Right, moving on. Wednesday, and the retained EU law bill hits the floor of the Commons. MPs clash with the UK government over the timetable and the fact that ministers and not MPs get to say what will be scrapped and what will be kept. Right. Amendments to there was a lot of amendments laid into this bill, but amendments were tabled on vital things as well. There was an amendment to protect environmental standards. It was voted down. There was an amendment to protect employment rights, and it was voted down. Amendment to protect consumer rights, and it was voted down. An amendment to give MPs, not ministers, the power to decide what goes and what stays, was voted down. This is a massive power grab by the Cabinet Office in the House of Thieves, carpetbaggers. Now a handful of shuffling half-wits will decide which of our rights will be thrown on the bonfire of EU laws. That includes your workers' rights, your civil liberties, your consumer rights, the lot. And that will be left in a handful, in the hands of a handful of corrupt, bent Tory ministers. Now, this is the European Reform Group within the Conservative Party's wet dream come true. This was the ultimate aim of Brexit, and the Brexit lies to vote. And the population in England and Wales to vote for this madness. The ultimate aim of Brexit was to protect the power, privilege and patronage of a few, and to deregulate the UK markets. As I said the other day, this is bloody dangerous stuff. And it would appear that they are going to get free rein and the ERG is going to get its way before there's a general election. And as we know, Starmer will not roll back any of this stuff. He just won't. So, the retained EU law bill has now passed its first stage in the Commons. It was always going to. The Tories have a massive majority. Deregulation is their aim. It's now going to go to the House of Lords for its first reading in the Lords. It's believed the House of Lords are going to try and hold it there for as long as possible, laying down as many amendments as possible to try and bust this Tory timetable. They've only got about 18 months. What they got? The latest they could go for an election is January 2025. So they've only got 2 years to ram through the deregulating of the markets here in the UK. So the Lords are going to try and hold this up as long as they can in reading 1, and they're going to hold it up as long as they can in reading 2. But this law will get us through by the end of the year, folks. Mental. So, I'm afraid things are not looking rosy either side of that border. Up here, we've got Imperial Masters putting their jackboots on their necks for having the goal to have an opinion, for having the goal to be a different country, for having the goal to have different cultures, different values, different beliefs. It's like back in the 1700s again when they banned the Plaid and the Gaelic. It's getting that way again. Expect Section 35 orders to be bouncing about the place regularly, if you know it. So, there we go. The EU retained law bill passed its first reading last night, and that's really, really serious stuff, folks. As I say, consumer protections will all go out the window. Standards will all be lowered in food and in product safety. Workers' rights, maternity, paternity, holiday pay, sickness pay, all these things will go. And as we already know, the right to collective bargaining is under attack as well. Little England, stroke, our UK is in a mess, and they're dragging us all down with them. And it's time the Celtic nation stood up saying, enough stupid. But as we say, the imperial mask has slipped. Yesterday, UK funds were being referred to in the Commons chamber as English money being given to Wales and Scotland. Oof. Okay. There were some cracking speeches in that thing yesterday, and one of the best ones by Alan Smith, the SNP MP for Stirling, I think it is. Anyway, he turns up and says right, you're going to do this, but if you're going to do this bloody silly thing, don't do it in this bloody silly way. Bring it to the Commons, let's all get in about it, and let's extend this timetable so that we can tidy up properly. Cracking speech. Anyway, but he was right. The EU retained a law bill which plans to scrap 4,000 or 5,000 regulations and laws. Is a bloody stupid idea. But it is the ultimate goal of the ERG within the Conservative Party. And it looks like they're going to get their wet dream of a deregulated UK marketplace. I don't need to repeat myself. The main one that's going to affect most of us is the destroying of our workers' rights. Right, that's what I've got for you folks. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it informative. Time's getting on. First minutes will be soon. Let's get a quick swatch up with the papers I've got to see this morning, shall we? Let's get a quick swatch. Scotland's papers: teachers cut threat and gender lobbyist claim. Right. The Daily Lancet has 800 teachers face axe. Leaked document outlines shock proposal as part of Council's 51 million spending cuts. Education Union warns plans threaten to write off generation of school children. I'm not going to play the "I told you so" here, because public servants, they deserve, or public people working in the public sector do deserve the massive pay rise that they're asking for. They're just not getting it because there is no room in the budget. And I said they will get higher than they will get as much as the Scottish Government will give them. But I've also said that those in the public sector can expect cuts to the workforce. And that's basically what's going to happen here. So apparently 800 teachers face the axe. Well, I did say when they're demanding 10, 12, 15% to look each other in the face and ask whose jobs are gone. Right, the Times has gender bill lobbyists get millions from SNP. Charities and civil societies captured by government. The Times leads with a story claiming charities and civil groups who criticise the Westminster government's decision to block Scotland's gender recognition legislation receive millions of pounds in funding from the SNP administration. Where they get their funding fees no relevant. The Westminster government, the Scottish government, the Welsh government, the Northern Irish government, they horn out huge amounts of money in grants to the third sector, the fourth sector as they call it, the charity sector. The fact that these charities have an opinion over what Westminster do, that's got nothing to do with the fact that the Scottish Funding Council for funding grants. Nothing to do with it at all. Wow, talk about make up your bullshit as you go along. Hey, can you play the man, play the ball right enough? So he can't play the ball, play the man right enough. So this time it's the charities they're playing. The Scottish Daily Mail has Sturgeon's courtroom gamble is doomed, but guess who'll be left picking up the enormous bill? Isn't it great how many newspapers and rags have got crystal balls? One ex-High Court, Supreme Court judge says, actually you're wasting your time. So there's a push in the press to stop the Scotland for challenging the UK government. So win or lose, it's imperative that the Scottish government does challenge this bloody government. Because if the press are screaming don't, it means there must be a better chance that Scotland's going to overturn this Section 35 order. The Scotsman has oil and gas firm blames jobs cuts on windfall tax. I was going to mention that in my report, but I decided not to bother. They're making enough money. Anyway, the top story in the Scotsman reveals a major oil and gas company has blamed the government's windfall tax for a series of job cuts and the review of operations in the UK. Harbour Energy said that it was reassessing its future activity levels after that levy was increased from 25% to 35%. What is it today is nip out and buy a hammer and call it investment in order to find a bloody levy? Only rag the Daily Express has Scottish cops face strict vetting. Scottish cops already get strict vetting. And this is all because of these crooks in the Met and other police forces doing that one. Report this morning of one senior officer in the Met doing that one, committing suicide because hundreds of thousands of images, pornographic images of children were found in his house. Now, well, just an army officer banged up for 40 sexual offences, 20 odd of them rape. But because they've got bent cops doing that road, there has to be bent cops here in Scotland and all. You heard me talk about the 17,000 officers in Police Scotland and the fact that over the last 4 years, there's only been something like 100 sexual assault complaints made. I'd need to look the numbers up, but he's not reported on it. Right, what else we got? The IHAS prepay meter scandal grows. 99.9% of court warrants are waved through. So there you go. The courts aren't even stopping to have a look and say, hold on a minute, this woman's 60, 65, 66, 9, 70. You can't cut her off. No, you can't have that long. No, you can't change her. You can't have that long. Disabled people are getting PP meters put in their houses when they're supposed to be exempt, really. You can't cut them off. Wow. So there you go. PP meters are being forced on people and the courts are waving through the warrants. Of course, this would be in England, of course. Right, the Herald has crisis hit Scots firms plan more price hikes. Scottish economy is being dragged away from recovery. Of course it is. This isn't rocket science, this stuff. And they go, it's no rocket science. You cut yourself off your biggest market, and your economy goes into free fall, something like that. And of course, what's left in the internal market and those who are surviving, they've still got the energy cost crisis, and of course the increased cost of Brexit, meaning the ingredients that they're trying to make their goods from are much more expensive. Okay, nuts. The Telegraph has Dyson. Stupid short-sighted policies holding back economy. Dyson, you're one of the problems for this economy. You backed Brexit and then up and left to Singapore with your bloody company. What a bloody hypocrite. The National has. Tories will light path for Brexit Day rally. Stunning impact is expected at the time for Scotland's event, sending a message to Europe about our desire to remain. Top story in the National reveals that pro-European rally will be lit by torches, and the time to remain event is to send a message to Europe about our desire to remain. Well, rejoin, I should say. But I don't see a date for it. I will. Maybe it's a day. The Metro has Minister's Coffee Bean, and that's about the Chancellor trying to explain why inflation is so high in the UK and omitting Brexit from his numbers. Right, and the Star has don't be a donut, let us eat cake. Number 10 officially urges us to ignore health chiefs. No cakes at work advice. Oh, this was a stupid report yesterday. Apparently, you sitting next to your mate at work's as bad as passive smoking. You never didn't like it in your life. They let them eat cake, but that's exactly what the UK government's doing to the poor. Only they can't afford their bloody cake. Well, that's the papers a day, folks. I hope you found that interesting and informative for all. I don't know what's happened with the comments on restreaming YouTube today. I know there's 101 people watching on YouTube at the moment, but that's bro. Right, anyway, that's what I've got for you today, folks. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found it informative. Now, support the independent media support Broadcasters Scotland, Independence Live, Indie Live Radio, Caledon Media, Cruise Radio, the iScot magazine, and the national newspaper, support independent bloggers. And if you're a crowdfunder underway, and you can afford to throw a few shekels in the pot, then please do. As you know, I'm not interested in your money. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button, help us with our channel, subscribe, and share across your social media platforms, please. And if you're on Facebook and you're going to share this, which seems to be happening less and less, to be honest with you, I don't know if it's time to chuck this actually. Maybe you're getting bored with me. Put the comments and put the answer to that one in the comments. Anyway, if you're going to share it on Facebook, give me a couple of minutes after I go off to change the video to public. Thank you. Alright, now remember the last couple of bits of guidance, folks. Clean hands and surfaces regularly, and if you're in closed public spaces, mask up. Especially if you're not feeling well, mask up. Alright, show some consideration for your friends, your neighbours, your community. Okay, right, that's what I've got for you today, folks. We'll be back tomorrow. Oh no, hold on, the two Davies can't go this afternoon. David's got an emergency, a medical situation that he's got to deal with. So the two Davies programme will now go out on Friday, tomorrow. Alright, you'll be notified at the time on Facebook and YouTube, hopefully. Alright, we'll put a wee video out on YouTube to say what time we're going live at. Alright, folks, as I say, thanks again. Look after yourselves, look after each other. And we'll be back tomorrow around the week up. First Minister's is on, so I better get off and let you all get out of First Minister's. Have a nice day.